Namaste everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today we're back with Kṣaṇāti doing our part 3 video, Jupiter transit to Taurus, and we're starting with Libra sign today. Namaste Kṣaṇāti, welcome back.
Namaste, Navjeet. It's such an honor and pleasure to be back here today to discuss this very exciting Jupiter in Taurus transit. It's a really exciting time for people. Today we'll be discussing Libra onwards. We'll see which sign we end with, depending on how long the video is, because I don't want it to be too lengthy, and I want to give everyone a proper analysis. But it's a very exciting transit. We have Kritika, Rohini, Mrigashira Nakshatra. As it moves through these different nakshatras, it will also create a different vibration. So in addition to discussing it as it relates to each ascendancy, at the end I will be discussing how it kind of affects each nakshatra on a global, political, and personal scale. And it's such an honor to be doing this co-collaboration with Dr. Arjun Pai, Astrology, and Kṣaṇāti Jyotish. And so I'll just open with a quick chant to Jupiter. I believe it's always the best to honor Guru Deva before talking about him behind his back. So we will discuss this. Oh. 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 Om Gananam Tva Ganapatim Havamahe Kavim Kavinam Upamashtravasamam Jaistarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatana Srinbanu Tibihi Sida Sadhanam Vakratanda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakayeshu Sarvada Siddhi Buddhi Shakti Sahita Shriman Mahaganati Pataye Namo Namaha Nirvignam Kuru. Om Devanam Cha Rishnam Cha Gurum Kanchana Shanibam Puri Bhutam Triloksham Tam Namami Brahaspatim Devanam Cha Rishnam Cha Gurum Kanchana Shanibam Puri Bhutam Triloksham Tam Namami Brahaspatim Devinam Cha Rishnam Cha Gurum Kanchana Sanibam Buri Bhutam Triloksham Tam Namami Brahaspatim Om Gram Grim Gram Saha Gurudeva Nama 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 Hari Om Om Namah Shivaya Namaste. Okay, everybody, so let's start looking at some charts in this very exciting Jupiter and Taurus transit, starting with Libra, Tula Lagna. So here we go, Libra North and Libra South. Okay, excellent. Okay, great. Let's start to look at these different positions. First, we will see that for the Libra ascendancy, we have to talk about the functional benefic and malefic aspect. And we know that Libra is ruled by Venus, and Venus has an enemy relationship with Jupiter. We know that Jupiter is the guru of the gods, Guru Deva, and that Venus is the Surya guru, the guru of the Rakash, the demon guru. So we have to understand that these energies can sometimes come in conflict with each other, but still, because Jupiter is in Taurus, which is related to also Venus and ruled by Venus, that there will be some very functionally positive energies for this transit as the Libra ascendancy. Now, the first thing that we notice is that Jupiter posits itself within the 8th bhava. This is the bhava of vulnerability. right? So this is a very important thing to understand, as we know that the karma of the Libra ascendancy is all about balance, moderation, being able to kind of adjust our lives so that there is not too much focus in one area and more of a balanced or holistic approach to life, not focusing too much on one thing. As we know that this is a specific challenge for the Libra ascendancy, as they can have challenges with the prioritization of romantic relationship. They can have challenges with the prioritization of pleasure, hedonism. They can have challenges with the prioritization of their jobs or careers, financial prioritization. And the most important thing is the balance in life. Um, because of this vulnerability of needing to achieve balance, there's a strong evolution that leads to uh, being very wise about what's good for us and what's bad for us. And I believe that the Jupiter position in the eighth house is a very important um, evolutionary aspect for the Libra ascendancy, because this is the house of vulnerability. And we also know from a medical Jyotish perspective, when you're talking about the stages of disease in Ayurveda, this includes Sthana, Shamstre, Vyakti, and Beta stage of disease, right? So these are chronic illnesses that can actually lead to death. So it's very important to understand this karma, which is naturally Taurus for the Libra ascendancy. As Jupiter moves into there, we are now experiencing some wisdom as to what will be our weaknesses in life, what will be the things that harm our health, what will be the things that cause disease. And we're talking about serious illnesses at this point, right? We all have some genetic predispositions. And for the Libra ascendancy, it's very important in general, but specifically during this transit, to understand, well, what are your genetic predispositions? For example, you could have a genetic predisposition to various types of cancer. We all have certain cancers that we're more vulnerable to as it relates to our family and relates to our karmas. This can include colon cancer, stomach cancer, prostate cancer, ovarian cancer, breast cancer, lung cancer. And we can understand from a medical Jyotish perspective, like what cancers or challenges we're vulnerable to. And Navjeet and I did a lengthy series on medical Jyotish as well that you can check back on both of our channels if you're more curious about this. Um, so understanding those vulnerabilities means that you have to make certain lifestyle decisions to kind of protect yourself. And so if you have a lung disposition, you cannot be smoking. If you have a colon cancer disposition, you need to be careful about how much meat, how much cheese, how much corn syrup and unhealthy sugars that you have. If you have a disposition to drug addiction or alcohol addiction, you must understand that sobriety is the only option. So understanding these vulnerabilities creates a certain level of wisdom within the person. And so Jupiter in this eighth house position will kind of encourage this investigation of wisdom. But that's only the first step, right? Because just because you have the wisdom doesn't mean that we follow it. And that's why Jupiter and Mars are also such important relationship friends, because it's one thing to have the wisdom and it's the other thing to put it into action. And so it's actually more negative to have the wisdom and to not use this. That's why they say that ignorance is bliss. Now, of course, it's not actually blissful to be ignorant because you're denying your spiritual evolution, but it is blissful or positive in terms of karmic response or karmic consequences. Because once you have the wisdom and you go against it, Jupiter will give the punishment. We always think of Jupiter as this great benefic, and trust me, it's expansive. It's the guru. It has a very, supportive energy. But I always say, and my father says this, that God helps those that help themselves. So it's not like Jupiter will help you if you don't follow the wisdom that supports it. And so the number one disease in Ayurveda, according to Charak and Shishrut and Bhagbat, and also as well as Dr. Vasant Lad, is Pragna Parad, which means crimes against wisdom. So I must warn the Libra ascendant that during this time, you must not commit any crimes against your own wisdom. And of course, if you're saying I am perfect and I don't commit any crimes against wisdom and I don't have these vulnerabilities, you're lying to yourself. We all have weaknesses. We all have vulnerabilities. We all have challenges. They might not be severe, but sometimes when certain people get depressed, they eat ice cream on the couch. Whenever we kind of like try to self-medicate ourselves with anything, it usually has karmic consequences, because truthfully, our soul, our body, our mind wants to actually experience the negative emotions. It might sound like that's difficult, but I do believe that we must be in touch with our emotions and experience them and not try to run away from them even when they're difficult. So I do believe this to be a very supportive evolutionary position, but it can certainly have its challenges if we are going against our innate wisdom. Now, some other activations, there's a double Upachaya activation here, right? Because we have Sagittarius and Pisces on the 3rd and the 6th position. These houses create an Upachaya, which means they grow over time, which means there's an evolution over the entirety of the period, which means even though it started in May 1st of 2024 and will end at some point in May 2025, it's very important to understand that it actually evolves over the course of its period. So that wisdom, that evolution of the individual will continue to increase. Now, the 3rd house, I like to mention, of course, it's the house of siblings. And so there can be an evolution in the relationship with our siblings over the course of this period. It's always about being the bigger person with Jupiter, right? Because everyone is at a different level of their spiritual evolution. And I don't mean this to be condescending. If I find that sometimes spiritual people can say, oh, well, I'm more superior spiritually than other people. And there's not one guru that encourages us to feel like we're superior to others. We're all absolutely equal to one another. And if you don't feel this, then I believe that you will be humble from a karmic perspective. But it is important to understand that everyone is at a different level in their evolution, not greater, not worse, just different. And due to this difference, being the bigger person when it comes to Jupiter is really about understanding that wherever your spiritual perspective is, it's not necessarily important for your siblings to understand it. You have to meet people where they are at in life. And the Jupiter and the Libra ascendancy, it's very important to meet people where they're at in life as a Libra, so that you can have a balanced and harmonious relationship with them. If you expect people to believe what you believe, you will be sorely disappointed in this life. So it's very important to understand that this evolutionary perspective, this is one of the most evolutionary periods for the Libra ascendancy, but you have to meet people where they're at. You have to meet your siblings where they're at. And you'll see with the 6th house as well, you have to meet your coworkers where they're at. You have to meet your colleagues where they're at. And that, is very important as a Jupiter ascendancy, to be humble during this period. Now, the other thing about the 3rd house, which I'll quickly mention, is it's the house of courage, ambition, and motivation. When I'm certifying my students, I'll often tell them that this is the fuel that you put in your car in terms of Kama, right? We have the Kama activations of 3, 7, and 11 Bhava. And when you're looking at this 3rd house activation of Kama, what kind of aspect of life is motivating you? Is it your spiritual practice that's motivating you? Is it your family that's motivating you? Is it money that's motivating you? Is it ego that's motivating you? So I mentioned 2 positive things that could be motivating you: the love for your family and your love of God, or very dark things can be motivating you, like just money in itself, or your belief that you are in ego superior. So you really have to balance out these aspects, as Sagittarius does support the moral and ethical evolution in the individual over the course of this period. But it's very important to understand to be very humble during this period and to allow yourself to be motivated by things that are essentially pure, which means you have to keep a sattvic disposition. However, Jupiter in Taurus is not entirely sattvic. As Dr. Lott always says, we should be 40% sattvic, 30% rajasic, 30% tamasic. Although many individuals in this life like to be hyper sattvic, right? I am 90% sattvic. I only eat khichdi every single day of my life. No, have some paneer tikka masala, have some puri, have some all these things that are enjoyable in life too. It's about having a balanced life as well for the Libra ascendancy. And I hope everyone got a little giggle at that. The last thing I'll mention for the Libra ascendancy is the Taurus activation. This is also an evolutionary aspect in the chart for the Libra ascendancy. This means to improve the relationship and be able to respect and honor your colleagues. But this is also the house of enemies. And Rahu is also there. So it can be kind of hidden enemies, secret enemies over the course of this transit. But it's very important to understand that it's very easy for us to be mean to people that don't support us or to be unkind. But from any spiritual perspective, kindness is matched with kindness. Hate is matched with hate. Anger is matched with anger. I mean, we can see this in our world that we're living in on a global perspective. Violence breeds violence. So if you're looking at this perspective as to what kind of evolutionary aspects should be supported, and this is an old saying, and I do believe this to be true, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. It's very important to be kind to the people that you might consider your enemies, those that are kind of talking behind your back or making fun of you. Throwing shade is the slang, being jestful about things that are very serious to you. Yes, it can be hurtful, but try not to take it personally, because when we are aligned to our higher self, nothing is personal. It's all a manifestation of God, right? Amma is in everyone. You know what I'm saying? So it's very important to understand to be very humble and kind to those people that are giving you the most challenges in your life. This will create a very strong support materially for you, right? So it's sometimes hard to see that, being kind to people that don't support us and are considered our enemies, how is that going to help me monetarily? Well, we have to understand the Artha activation here. The sixth house activation does support finances and career. So when we are able to be the bigger person in our life in terms of the people that give us the most challenges by being in service to them, because the sixth house is also a service activation, this can be a very, very positive for the transit of the Libra ascendancy. So I hope that was helpful for everyone. Now we will go on to Scorpio ascendancy. This is a very functionally benefic transit because, as I mentioned earlier, and this is always true, is that Mars and Jupiter need each other. I always think about Yogananda Ji, who had this beautiful Jupiter-Mars combination in the eighth bhava. This is very important to understand because he took that spiritual wisdom and he put it in action as directed by his guru and brought it here to the West. So for the Scorpio ascendancy, this Jupiterian energy is extremely potent. And as you can see, so it's functionally benefic, so it can be one of the most beneficial transits for the Scorpio ascendancy. Now here you can see that Jupiter is in the seventh house. Wow. So we know that even before we analyze the seventh house, that Jupiter in the seventh house has full aspect on the ascendancy. So whatever is going on in your ascendant, whatever planets are going on in the ascendant, Jupiter is also going to be interacting with them, right? So it's important to understand what that interaction will bring. Now, from an energetic general perspective, Jupiter in the ascendant will cause the expansion of many things in the life, because when Jupiter has an effect on the ascendant, it kind of protects the whole chart. This will cause an expansion in the wisdom of the individual, and because of the Taurus vibration, an expansion in the success of the individual, both monetarily and spiritually and romantically, right? Because now Jupiter is in the seventh bhava. When we're looking at that Jupiter in the seventh bhava, so traditionally, it's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword to have Jupiter in the seventh bhava. The positive aspect is if you're willing to grow, and there is a lot of growth, as mentioned, from the aspect on the ascendancy and that Jupiter-Mars combination for the Scorpio ascendancy. And it's one of the most positive periods romantically. I mean, if you're having challenges in your relationship before this transit, there's a huge potential for those challenges to be resolved, for those challenges to be eradicated out of your life. But this is general romantic support and advice, is that, two people when they meet are at a certain frequency, which is why they're attracted to each other. Then as hopefully both people grow in the relationship, the frequency continues to increase so that attraction and love can prosper. The challenging aspect of this Jupiter in the seventh house is that the Scorpio ascendancy could be growing over the course of this period. And so the partner needs to be growing too, right? Because we would like the partner, as they grow, to be able to pick that lower energy of their partner up. And so hopefully their partner raises to the frequency, but that's not how it works psychologically. How it works psychologically is it's way more likely for the partner to bring the person who's trying to evolve down. And then they both fall together. So this is very important thing to understand, is that grow or die here. And I don't mean actual death, but I mean death of our spiritual evolution. There's a very important thing to understand, that two people who love each other must continue to grow and evolve. We often think that relationship is about pleasure. It's about having fun. It's about kissing and going on vacations together and things like that. And I'm not saying that's not important. Sure, it's important, but it's not what karmically makes a relationship successful. What karmically makes a relationship successful is that two people are continuing to grow together. They must continue to have this balance of growing and learning together throughout their life to stay together. And I think actually, just to comment, that's why divorce is such a common thing now in our world, specifically in America and the North American continent. Because people aren't working on their spiritual evolution. And then as soon as one partner tries to work on the spiritual evolution, because of the predisposition for them to think that relationships are about pleasure, one partner says, okay, you want to grow? Screw you. And that's not how two people will continue to love and evolve together. So it's just one of those things. You must be honest with yourself about, is my partner growing with me, or is my partner growing away from me? And, you'll know the necessary actions to take if they're growing away from you. It doesn't mean breaking up. It doesn't mean divorce, but it could certainly mean I have to do everything like therapy, and maybe talking to a Jyotish about, what are the strengths and weaknesses and how to balance this aspect of our relationship. I always encourage the staying together, but eventually it becomes a point where it just doesn't work between two people if they're not getting that support that they need to grow. So also for the Scorpio ascendancy, you're having a beautiful activation on the second house. And this is actually a very favorable aspect for the Scorpio ascendancy, because remember, Jupiter is in Taurus, which is the second Rashi. And then the second Rashi is activated and the second Bhava. So you're having a double 2 activation, 2-2 if you're into numerology. Due to this activation, it will cause as I mentioned, there's the romantic evolution potential, but there's a huge material evolution potential. It's very possible that when Jupiter was in Aries, there have been financial challenges for the Scorpio ascendancy. There can be difficulties as it relates to that aspect and that activation, because the sixth house is upachaya, which can create a Dusthana vibration as well, which can create material challenges. Now that it's moving into the seventh bhava, there's a huge potential positive activation due to that 2-2 on the second house. This means that the savings account, the work-related investments, the material security of the Scorpio ascendancy can really increase over this next year. Now, as I mentioned with the Libra ascendancy, Pragna Parad in terms of our life, well, the Pragna Parad that they're most vulnerable to, the Scorpio ascendancy, is financial. How are we spending our money? How are we saving our money? There needs to be this focus on moral and ethics as it relates to our finances, right? So we can't sell anyone short, because that will have karmic retribution. But it's also the wisdom as to what your vulnerability in terms of spending is. Do you like to shop? Do you go to the casino? Do you like to go on vacation? We all have these things that are extraterraneous, or, in terms of what we spend our money on. And we must consolidate our finances, if you're the Scorpio ascendancy, so that that money can be saved for the potential of the most material evolution over the course of this period, in terms of the prosperity potential. Now, we also see a fifth house activation here. This is a beautiful position for education. And when Jupiter is influencing that education, and we also see Rahu there. So this is creativity, intelligence, education, and children are some of the primary activations of this fifth bhava. So when you look at it from an educational perspective, Jupiter is there, which means, okay, well, it's possible, there was no educational activation during this transit of Jupiter in Aries. So it's like, where do I need to fill in the gaps in terms of my education? So it's like things that you want to study. Now is a great time to study them. But I always like to talk about, because Rahu is there in the Pisces, we have to talk about that Rahu influence for the Scorpio ascendancy and the Jupiter activation of that house. Rahu kind of represents that which is outside the box, as well as advancement in technology. So the educational influence of Rahu here is saying, okay, you want to study something? Well, odds are it's outside of the box of what society and culture says that it's an important thing to study. So I'm not sure this activation for the Scorpio ascendancy is going to medical school, going to law school, or receiving some kind of formal degree in some kind of formal society, supported educational aspect. This is more like things like Jyotish, Ayurveda, Vastu Shastra, yoga. These are more of these things from a Vedic perspective. But I mean, you can think of these things outside of the Vedic umbrella as well, where you have certain things like tarot. You know what I mean? You have, Reiki. You have, so all of these practices that are kind of outside of that normal spectrum, this is one of the most beneficial periods if you're the Scorpio ascendancy, which is essentially very curious to investigate these aspects. So I really highly encourage that. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention about this fifth house is children. So, I mean, listen, this is a very loaded topic, and I'm not going to tell people what they should be doing in terms of having children or anything like that. But let's say you already have children. With Rahu in that aspect, your children probably has been having some challenges. And the Jupiter aspect, Jupiter is the most forgiving planet, right? So if you go back to some of the Shastra and Vedic texts as it relates to Jupiter, we all know the story about the Jupiter and the moon. And the moon slept with Tara, Jupiter's wife. And the moon, after talking to Venus, and Jupiter's in Taurus right now, actually began to understand that it had committed some kind of karmic, thing that was going to have a negative repercussion when it slept with and impregnated Tara, and Tara went on to have Mercury, right? So Moon went back to Jupiter and said, Jupiter, I'm so sorry. I kidnapped, slept with your wife, and got her pregnant. And for most people, this would be something unforgivable. But Jupiter, in a split second, says, oh, of course you're forgiven. No problem. Because that's how forgiving Jupiter is. And we know this can be taught through our gurus, and Ritananda Mayama teaches us this level of forgiveness. And Jesus Christ, for those that are Judeo-Christian, also has this level of forgiveness. For the resentment, we know, is the anger that eats away at us. It's not like we have resentment towards someone and they feel it. It's not causing any negative thing for them. It's us who suffers from this resentment. So if you're having issues with your children over the course of this period, learn to forgive them. Let go and let God in this circumstance. Now, in terms of the potential to have children, if you want to have children, it's going to activate fertility over the course of this period. But Rahu is also there. So if you don't want to have children, be very careful, because surprise, the increase of fertility and Rahu, which is activating the surprise as it relates to the children, can actually cause surprise children over the course of this trend. So if you don't want to have children, be very careful. If you do want to have children, it could be a very auspicious time. Look for when the moon is in Pisces over the course of this transit. That will be very specifically positive time. So that's one thing to mention as well. And then creativity. We all have creative energy. We all have creative outlets. There's not one person in this world that isn't creative. And I think creativity can be misunderstood. I mean, often we think of creativity as art, as music. But all things that are, there are many more things that are creative. Builders are creative. Masons are creative. Construction workers are creative. Jyotish are creative. You know what I mean? It's all about, we have this divine energy of Purusha and Prakriti inside of us. And when we connect with that Prakriti energy, which is the divine feminine aspect, then this creativity can flow out of us. So it's very important that for the Scorpio ascendancy to understand not if you have a creative aspect, but find out what your creative aspect is and utilize it as an outlet in your life. So I hope this was a helpful elaboration on the Scorpio ascendancy. How did that resonate for you, Navjeet? Oh, you're muted, Navjeet. Okay, well, it's okay if you're having mic challenges. Don't even worry about it. We'll continue on with Sagittarius here. But I appreciate the thumbs up. And so we will move on and discuss the Sagittarius ascendancy here. Okay, so for the Sagittarius ascendancy, this is one of the most functionally benefic transits. Not necessarily for the Sagittarius ascendancy, as in terms of where Jupiter could be in any position, but we always know that Jupiter is a very strong functional benefic for the Sagittarius ascendancy, as Sagittarius is the Mula Trikona position. It's actually the preferred sign of Jupiter because Jupiter owns Sagittarius and Pisces, but it prefers Sagittarius. So the Jupiter transit for the Sagittarius ascendancy is one of the most favorable. When you're looking at this Sagittarius activation, the first thing that we're going to look at is that sixth house. Now, we've already talked in a little bit of detail about what that activation could be on the sixth house, but understand that for the Sagittarius ascendancy, this is a very strong financially lucrative position. Even though it's Upachaya, Dusthana, we know it's going to grow over the course of this 1 year transit. When Taurus is influencing that sixth house, as well as Jupiter, this is a real chance to save money. Now, it's important to understand that we know the sixth house is the house of work, but not necessarily the full career evolution. I mean, often I like to say about the sixth house, if you had billions of dollars, you wouldn't be doing the work that relates to the sixth house. In this position, however, it's important to be able to do the work that might not be the most fulfilling thing for you, because over the course of this transit, it could be one of the most financially lucrative periods for you. So even though, if you had all the money in the world, you might not be doing what you're doing in terms of income over the course of this transit. Well, if you want to have all the money in this world, you will continue to do it over the course of this transit. So that's something very important to kind of integrate. Is I call it biting the bullet, or paying your dues is what society says, but I don't necessarily see that, because some people pay their dues their whole life, and that's not fair because it's what society and culture supports. However, it is important to understand that specifically for this transit, paying your dues, putting in the time and effort outside of the thing that's most fulfilling for you could be very, very beneficial over the course of this transit. So that's one thing I want to highly encourage. The other thing that I want to encourage is that for the Sagittarius ascendancy, they're very moral, they're very ethical, and they're very wise, right? These are strong karmic energies as it relates to the Danu's position here. But when you're looking at that Jupiter sixth house, that doesn't mean that they don't have vulnerabilities. We talked about Prajna Parad, crimes against wisdom. It's always something I like to mention whenever there's 6, 8, 12th house activations. And this sixth house activation is saying, okay, well, this is the house of the first 3 stages of disease. So we're not worried as much as chronic diseases here or things that could take us out, but we are still very concerned with kind of the fluctuation in our life. And we know that Taurus and Jupiter are both kapha. So what kind of indulgences do you have in your life? And again, if you say you have no indulgences, then your indulgence is being hypersattvic, which is also not balanced. So again, we can think of indulgence not in terms of we're doing too much of something necessarily. We can be doing too little of something and not giving ourselves this balanced life. And remember, a huge part of this Jupiter and Taurus transit, because it's ruled by Venus, is that this transit wants us to have balance and harmony and moderation in many aspects of our life. That's what it's pushing us toward. But what thing in your life is not being balanced? And this will cause a distortion in the doshas. So it's very important to find that balance. And again, this is also a period during the sixth house where you need to kind of be the bigger person, be very kind, be very forgiving, and this will help the material evolution. Now, another activation is the ascendancy. So there's a huge evolutionary aspect over that Upachaya activation that's also influencing the ascendancy here. You know, what is your moral compass? What are your ethics? And as mentioned, Jupiter needs Mars. And so just to have an understanding, well, I believe this is right and I believe this is wrong is not enough. And it's also important for the Sagittarius energy to not feel like they're morally superior or they will deal with challenges that relates to the sixth house. So it's very important to be understand your moral compass and not try to push it onto other people, because if you push it onto other people, it will create enemy karmas. This means that when we're trying to be the best version of ourselves or the guru within ourselves, we need to just practice what we preach and keep our side of the street clean and not judge other people, right? Because it's not helpful to be judgmental to other people. In this specific case for the Sagittarius ascendancy, it will cause karmic retributions. So it's really just about going about your life, trying to do the next right thing, and keeping your side of the street clean without judging others, which might sound easy, but not as easy as it sounds. The other activation that I like to emphasize, and we always talk about Rahu when it's in Pisces during this entirety of pretty much most of this transit of Jupiter and Taurus. The fourth house activation will be causing some kind of challenges as it relates to the home. And we also have Rahu positioned there. Now, those challenges in the home have always been there. It's not like they're new. But why are they coming to the surface? Because one of the most important things, and I have Jupiter in my fourth house, is that during this transit, it's important to know that A, the temple is your home, right? We're all on a path of spiritual evolution here. But if you go home and all there is a television and video games and candy and cigars, what are you going to do? You're going to play video games while you're eating pizza and eating candy and smoking a cigar. This is very important to understand because your home is a manifestation and a symbol of your spiritual path. So you must make your home a temple over the course of this period, which means you must remove the things which are not supporting of that spiritual evolution. Now, what if you have roommates? What if you live with your family and you can't actually make the changes that are necessary? You might have to move. And this is something where you're saying, oh, well, I don't know what my life will be like if I make this move. And remember, the fourth house is a moksha activation. So it's like you have to take that leap of faith in order for your spiritual evolution to be supported. So that's one of the things that, as I mentioned, this could be a very materially prosperous period, but you have to make sure that your home and your body is that temple too. And what you're putting in your body is a manifestation of your spiritual path. So I hope everyone enjoyed this elaboration on Jupiter and Taurus as it relates to Scorpio, as it relates to Libra, as it relates to Sagittarius. And I really love discussing this with all of you. Next video, we'll discuss Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, as well as the various nakshatras.
Thank you. Thank you, Kṣaṇāti. Sorry, I couldn't unmute it earlier somehow, but now, yeah, the Scorpio one sounds really good, and I'm super excited for this transit. I think I can already feel the energy shifting from the sixth house to the seventh. I'm feeling a little more happier, I would say, in the energy. Yeah. So that's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. See you soon for
Yeah.
Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, as well as Kritika, Rohini, and Mrigashira we will discuss as well. Hariom.
Looking forward to it, Kṣaṇāti.